Okay, thank you so much for coming. This is the Celebrity Culture Club. This is our 7th event so far. It's a series of roundtable discussions bringing together academics and those working in what could broadly be described as the media and cultural industries, or creative industries, depending on your terminology, to talk about the important ideas of the day in relation to celebrity culture. And we do this because regardless of whether you think of yourself as being interested in celebrity, you are affected by it. It is the air we breathe. It permeates our everyday experience. And so I used to work in the media. I'm Dr. Hannah Yellin from Oxford Brookes University, and I run the Celebrity Culture Club. And I used to work in the media, and now I work in academia, and I found that I was having the same kinds of conversations about the same topics, kind of social ideas and people, but coming at it from a very different perspective with a very different vocabulary. So I set up this series of events. Organisation is too grand. We're not an organisation yet.
We're not organised.
As you've seen with us getting ready, we're not entirely organised. He says, dabbing the sweat from his brow, having just arrived. So I set this up to bring us together so that we can exchange those ideas, see the points of correlation and difference, and collectively push our thinking forward on what I think is a topic that's so important because of the way that it surrounds us. So today's specific topic is celebrity and bad taste. And we find discourses of taste just always running under the surface when we're looking at celebrity culture. And these discourses, these narratives, these ideas, these ways of talking have various particular functions. So we've got a really stellar panel for you to interrogate this really interesting topic as well. I think I'll introduce everybody one by one as it's their turn to talk. The structure's going to be, everybody's going to talk for maybe 10, 15 minutes each, approximately, and then we'll have a little bit of facilitated discussion and questions from you guys. So if you have any, please do jot them down as they occur to you, because we're very, very glad to take them. But just a little about my own research and thinking on the topic before I pass over. So I look at specifically the memoirs of female celebrities, but more broadly, the opportunity that women in the public eye get to represent themselves because they're so often mediated, and we often think of celebrity in ideas of kind of puppetry or being manipulated. So I'm very interested in those moments where we can see that a celebrity is positioning themselves in a certain way with a certain agenda to say something about themselves and in particular their gender. So often I see the idea of good taste circulating as a kind of punitive tool to police how celebrities are performing their femininity. One figure that gets that a huge amount is Kim Kardashian. I write about her memoir and the racialized representation in the way that she and her sisters talk about their Armenian ethnicity, always in kind of slightly apologetic terms. And this is interesting because I don't know if you can read these memes, but we've got 8 memes up on the screen there, and they all say, in a world full of Kardashians, be a insert alternative celebrity who was supposedly doing a better performance of good taste, femininity. So we've got Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, Princess Diana, Kate Middleton, Ivanka Trump, Meredith Grey from the TV show Grey's Anatomy. We've even got Stevie Nicks and Marie Curie, historic scientist. So what does that little collection say about good taste? Well, for a start, they're all white. So in a world full of Kardashians, be white is partly what's being said under the surface here. And it's classed as well. Look, Princess Diana, Kate Middleton, and of course, Grace Kelly and Audrey Hepburn, their figures are very class associated with Grace Kelly, literal royalty, Audrey Hepburn, always talked about in terms of her European nobility, and Ivanka, one of the richest women in America. So it's good taste femininity is white, it's class, it's high class, it's restrained. And when we see the slightly interesting examples of Marie Curie and the fictional character Meredith Grey, who was a doctor, there's a hierarchy being communicated there of what is acceptable culturally to spend your time doing, with science being held up as the ideal, or kind of countercultural music, which again is quite a privileged status. Not everybody has that musical education, for example. So in a world full of Kardashians, Hope shows the incredible, it suggests a real consensus, right? These are not explicit jokes with an explicit punchline. We supposedly know inherently when we see a meme like that what is bad taste femininity represented by a Kardashian, which is being circumscribed here to be avoided. What I'm interested in as well is when celebrity women deliberately perform bad taste in a kind of rebellious way as a resistant act against those restrictive ideas or the respectability politics that surround female celebrity. So on the left here we have UK, formerly glamour model, crossed over to be reality TV star, and just generally ubiquitous in celebrity gossip media, Katie Price. And I analyse her memoirs in my forthcoming book. And one of my favourite lines is, "Journalists always slag me off saying that I'm fake. Well, hello, I admit I'm fake." And she's had a lot of plastic surgery, and she deliberately performs this, performative version of excess femininity, of a kind of like hyperbolic physicality to her femininity. And her embrace, well, hello, I admit it. In doing that, she's trying to position herself beyond the reach of the journalists who want to humiliate her by saying that she falls short of what is supposedly good taste for celebrity femininity. She is willfully sitting outside of that space. And then just this week, I don't know if you know, Caroline Calloway is an Instagram star whose ghostwriter outed her as being ghostwritten in the New York Times just this week. And I'm very interested in her because she's using Instagram as a form of memoir, as a form of celebrity autobiography. And the fact that it is... So this picture she posted 2 days after her dad died. And I won't read the long caption, but it's basically saying, people tell me how I should and shouldn't grieve, how I should and shouldn't present myself as a woman, and it's considered bad taste for me to be posting naked pictures of myself at this particular time. So this also shows that at stake in good these together show that at stake in good femininity, good celebrity femininity, is this idea of naturalness, right? And not being seen, not making oneself too visible, and certainly not making oneself visible in such a way that suggests that you want to be looked at and you want to be looked at sexually. So both of these women, I think, highlight that idea of naturalness and authenticity at stake by showing the performativity of what they're doing. And if we take that one step further, I started with In a World Full of Kardashians. And I just typed in a world full of Kardashians, and it came up with all of those other women that you saw. But there's an alternative strand, and I saw these three names came. Again, it's still Kardashian bashing, so I'm not for it because I'm not interested in policing some ways of being a woman in the world. That's not cool. But in a world full of Kardashians, be divine. Now, divine, if you don't know her, is an iconic drag queen from, she and John Waters made movies together in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So really, successful longevity to the partnership, to the career. And the character is fully reveling, embracing the excess of bad taste, embracing wrongness and too muchness and unruliness and mess, and all of her performances, embracing bad femininity, excessive and over-the-top femininity. And I think this shows the kind of course, Kim Kardashian is still the bad object here, but there is, if performativity is our refuge, then maybe divine shows us, how we can take that even further to celebrate resisting good taste and its respectability politics. So that's a little perspective from my own research. I now want to hand over, we're going to go along this way. I'm going to hand over, you probably know Dr. Mercer Olivier, who has very kindly collaborated on making today happen. She's a lecturer in media and film, and she's director of the media and film degree here, and as an expert scholar in the field of celebrity, femininity and taste. So thank you very much for having us, Mercer.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming here and inviting me to this panel that is so close to my own research, as Hannah said. So just 1 second that I'm going to... Okay. So, I actually going to talk a little bit about some topics and concepts that Hannah has tackled a little bit. So I'm really interested in the relationship between class and taste, and how the concept of bad taste or tastelessness is used to portray and stigmatize the working class, and what role do celebrity culture play in these processes. So nowadays, it seems that we don't talk much about class. We are told that class is no longer an important topic. It's no longer useful to make sense of our society. It's no longer useful to take about inequality, because we make sense of inequalities sorry, the microphone is very loud. We make sense of inequalities through individualized narratives, through meritocratic narratives that explain that if you work hard enough, if you are talented enough, you will arrive wherever you want to. So if you are not on top, it's because it's your fault. This is the bottom line here. Nevertheless, we do talk about class, but using taste as an euphemism. And doing that, what we do is defining class not as a social position that we occupy and that we can abandon, but as a human nature, something that we are. So using taste as a substitute for class, what that does is makes it more difficult for people to ascend upward or backwards also, but especially upwards. So celebrity culture plays a crucial role in all that. Celebrities, of course, embody gendered and classed and racialized identities, as actually Hannah already said. And contemporary celebrity culture is organized upon these stark distinctions between good and bad celebrities, between deserving and undeserving celebrities, between celebrities that we should admire and celebrities that we should ridicule or even symbolically punish. So here, celebrity culture is playing this crucial role in teaching us to distinguish these good and bad citizens. I've worked extensively analyzing these working class stereotypes that are constructed actually across Western countries, and that pretty similar. I mean, if we compare British popular culture with Spanish popular culture, we find a lot of elements that are pretty similar in these stereotypes. Here we call the choni, what in the UK we call sometimes the chav or chavet. And this figure has been developed and portrayed in Spanish media extensively, especially during the crisis from the 2008 to until 2015. A lot of TV programs, reality programs, celebrities, even TV series were populated and were covered with these characters that embody this idea, these stereotypes of the working class, through which the working class is pathologized and is made abject. Right? They are made abject subjects through all these elements. Tastelessness and vulgarity, the excess that also Hannah was talking about, artificiality, the idea that they were like extensions and fake nails and big breasts, their ignorance, their lack of cultural capital, knowledge, qualifications, also their aggressive behavior. They are portrayed as being violent, being promiscuous, and also being obsessed with celebrity. I mean, in all these programs, all these related television programs and celebrity culture in general, these celebrity chonis, they are portrayed as wanting to be just a celebrity for without doing nothing. I mean, this celebrity is portrayed as detached from talent and work, or from legitimate definitions of talent and work. So let me just play a very quick clip from a TV series actually that was called Aida. And Aida, well, I think that you may know about this TV series, but maybe you don't know this one. This TV series is one of the main characters of this TV series is Lore, who is a working class girl. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, sorry. So, okay, no. So, okay. Lore is a working class girl, and she, at the end of the TV series, she became a Big Brother contestant, and when she gets expelled, she becomes a celebrity. So when she arrived from Big Brother, that's what happens.
Una foto. Oye, que sentimos mucho que te hayan echado, pero me las has apañado, para que no notes la diferencia en casa. Mira, he puesto cámaras fotográficas en las esquinas. Eso, ya te quitará los cigarros y el Jonathan se pasará en gallumbo.
Gracias. Pero no os preocupéis, yo estoy contentísima. Si la primera en salir va de programa en programa, a poquito que la líe bien, en 2 días estaré de periodista del corazón.
Pues mira, si tú estás contenta, todos contentos. Venga, vamos a celebrarlo tomando una copita cava y cogerla rápido, que sea rápido. ¡Ah, cava!
Uy, cava, dice. Eso es de pobres. Ahora me gusta el champán. A ver si lo probáis algún día.
Vaya, por fin alguien con buen gusto en el barrio. No me digas que has probado el Moët Chandon.
No, Moët Chandon no. ¡Champán! Y vamos que voy muy justo de tiempo. A la 1 tengo un cóctel con los de Telecinco. Macu, a las 3 tengo un cóctel con los de Telecinco.
So here the idea is that she may be famous, but she is she's very ignorant, as ignorant as she were before. So sorry, because this is very difficult to manage. Where's the cursor? Okay. No, I cannot. Okay. Sorry, I'm lost in the. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Finally. Okay. So, working class celebrities are, of course, portrayed as these undeserving recipients of wealth. And all these programs were, the Spanish media were populated with all these characters. But then, what I want to do now is to think a little bit about what has happened with this stereotype of the choni or the chaff here in Spain, but also in the States. And the starting point of the next presentation started with these two covers. One of them is this famous cover in which Kim Kardashian is represented as a new media mogul. So here, it's an intent. She's trying to change her definition as celebrity, right, and be seen as entrepreneurial and all that. And the other one is these are three trap singers: La Zoe, Miss Nina, and Bad Giel. Spanish trap singers. Trap is a musical genre that is seen as very, very low culture, that were featured in this cover of a very edge fashion magazine. So here I thought this maybe tells us that there's something that is changing about how we construct this idea of these stereotypes of the working class, and how, on the one hand, there's this mainstreaming of the working class aesthetics, I would say, and on the other hand, this would be the vain cover, and on the other hand, how these undeserving and tasteless celebrities are trying to redefine their public persona by challenging how they are being portrayed. And I will do that by looking first at Rosalía a little bit, and then at Cardi B, and I'm sure that I won't have time to do another one, but I also have something about Ilenia, which is a very famous reality television celebrity here in Spain. So, why Rosalía? Rosalía is a very well-known singer. I mean, now it's like this superstar after published Malamente and Pienso en tu mirada, and especially this Al Mal Querer album. So, Rosalía, her public appearances are, or her public persona is constructed upon these aesthetics that connect with this idea of bad taste, of working class aesthetics in her music videos, but also public appearances. So she's embodying this, a little bit this stereotype. She's appropriating of these aesthetics, working class aesthetics, the sportswear, the big brand names, the big nails, the excess, the artificiality. But at the same time that she's doing that, all the media discourses about her, they are portraying her through a discourse of cultural legitimation. So there's no doubt that Rosalía is a great singer, it's a big star. Here she's being compared with Beyoncé, so she's called the Spanish Beyoncé, which is interesting because, of course, Beyoncé is a racialized star, celebrity, but it's also, she embodies these definitions of the femininity tied to respectability, right, and hard work and all this. So she's like a very legitimized celebrity, and here in the other cover, she's called this visionary artist. So here in these media narratives about her, what is highlighted is her cultural capital. So on the one hand, she looks like she is wearing clothes that are connected with a working class taste, but at the same time, she has a lot of cultural capital. In all the interviews and media narratives, what is highlighted is that she studied music in the SMUC, which is, so she has a BA in music. El Malquerer was his final project for the BA, so she knows about music. She's not just a trap singer. Also, her wardrobe is from designers such as Poblenou, Spain, so it's not just working class couture. It's very high fashion. She has a very high fashion wardrobe, and also her album was analyzed by some, for example, here in this YouTube video, in which Jaime Altozano, he analyzes musically the popular music, and he's analyzing this album, El Malquerer, and he says, and let me explain why El Malquerer is brilliant and exceptional, and why I think that believing in Rosalía is literally the opposite to believing that the earth is flat. This is really interesting because what he's saying is that Rosalía is not a working class singer. I mean, she's not ignorant as maybe some trap or hip hop singers seem to be, but she knows what she's doing. She has all this knowledge and this cultural capital. So Rosalía, or liking Rosalía, is not an indication of low culture, is a reinterpretation of all these genres. And what is also interesting is that Rosalía herself responded at this video in Instagram stories. I don't know, okay, no. So this was...
La melodía de la estrofa de Malamente está inspirada en la copla y en las canciones flamencas que yo he oído durante estos años que he estudiado música. En realidad, no sé, quizá incluso yo creo que estaba como tenía en mente a Vallejo, a los tangos que había estudiado de Vallejo, a tangos en general, ¿no? Porque las palmas también llevan un poco ese aire, aunque están muy repetitivas, están muy en loop.
Bueno, pues esto en el trap se utiliza versión extreme. Cada 3 palabras que dice el cantante hay alguien de fondo diciendo algo.
El Malquerer tiene mucho de música urbana, pero al igual que de otras músicas, ¿no? No solo hay esta influencia. Y concretamente, yo sí que no pienso que haya trap en el disco. Creo que el trap es una música que yo la asocio a una temática muy concreta, ¿no? Que tiene que ver con las drogas, de una música que partió de Atlanta y... No sé, la verdad que yo no le veo el símil, o sea, como mucho, no sé, es que el uso de la 808, pues la 808 se ha usado en muchos otros contextos musicales, no solo en el trap, y el uso de los ad-libs, como él está comentando, como Jaime está comentando, es una cosa que está muy presente en la música urbana en general, y te diría incluso en el flamenco, o sea, es que en el flamenco los jaleos se llaman jaleos, que es lo equivalente a los ad-libs en la música urbana, que es estar hablando, estar gritando, estar usando tu voz.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So what Rosalía is doing in this video, which is very long, 27 minutes. I mean, this small Instagram stories, she's showing off her cultural capital. She's explaining how she knows what she's doing, and she's able to respond to this very specialized analysis of this YouTube video. So Rosalia is combining these working class looks with this cultural capital. And what is a little bit interesting, or I think it's interesting, is that because of this mixture, celebrity media don't know how to portray her, if legitimate or not legitimate celebrity. So here, this is an example from Cuore. Cuore is a very well-known celebrity gossip magazine. Cuore, what it does, this magazine is, it usually identifies if a celebrity has good taste or bad taste with stickers like ARC or WOW. So here, when talking about Rosalia, Cuore does not know how to, if what Rosalia is wearing is good or bad. So they telling that, well, they have all this gold and these bling rings and all that, and Kardashian manicure, but is this bad? Well, we don't know. I mean, we don't know if this is good or bad taste, because it's like this mixture. Okay, Cardi B. So, Cardi B, I think it's a very interesting phenomenon, and a very interesting celebrity that has to do with how celebrities try to sometimes portray themselves and deflect some of the criticisms and some of these classed definitions of what is a good or a deserving celebrity. She's this hip-hop singer from the Bronx that became well-known after appearing in a reality series, but then she has been very successful as a hip-hop singer. She has won several awards, and she has constructed her celebrity persona upon this narrative of upward social mobility, showing off what she has achieved, wearing designer clothes, but also retaining some markers of working classness. The accent, this excess aesthetics, the artificiality, the nails, all that, because these are key elements to retain authenticity, right? And this in hip-hop is very important. Nevertheless, what she's doing lately is, in Instagram, she's publishing videos in which she's very vocal about political issues. And also she's very vocal about feminism. So she comments on for example, the American government shutdown. She is in favor of healthcare. She also talks about how she is a feminist and why she is, sometimes she is identified as not a feminist, for example. Okay, sorry, because...
If you believe in equal rights with men and women, that makes you a feminist. I don't understand how you bitches feel like being a feminist is a woman, they have an education, they have a degree. That is not being a feminist. You discouraging a certain type of woman, that definitely doesn't make you one. And some bitches want to act like, oh, you have to read a book about feminism. No, you do not. There's only a definition for a simple word. The problem is that being a feminist is something so great, and y'all don't want me to be great, but too bad. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to encourage any type of woman. You don't have to be a woman like me for me to encourage and support you and tell you, yes, bitch, keep on going. And that's why you fucking mad, you little dusty ass bitch.
Okay, so here what she's doing is claiming her right to speak up, her right to be a part of the public sphere, to enter a field where she maybe, it's considered that she should not be entering. So she's calling the feminists to have a broader, more inclusive form of feminism. So of course we could argue that, well, all this falls into this post-feminism critique. I mean, her calling herself a feminist while projecting this very hypersexualized image, and also while talking about how she's now rich. I mean, all that falls into this umbrella of the post-feminism. But of course, it's really interesting how she's trying to negotiate her public image and ask for a place or to have voice talking about other kinds of issues.
Equal.
No. Yes. And in some media outlets, for example, this is an article of the Washington Post. Her public appearances are read as political acts, right? So, for example, this is from the Coachella festival, in which she was twerking while being heavily pregnant. This is read as a political act to show that you can be pregnant and you still can be working, etc., right? By doing this, Cardi B is actually reclaiming this space in the public sphere, and now he's appears in the Bernie Sanders campaign. She appears in this video interviewing Bernie Sanders in a nail salon, which is interesting because it's this mixture of public and private spaces. So all these have a lot to do with, or I think it's interesting because show how celebrities that embody these identities, they are trying to be perceived as deserving of being celebrities and having a voice in the public sphere. While in the Rosalia case, I think it's also interesting because it shows how these current struggles, tensions and contradictions around how working class identities are portrayed nowadays. And that's all. After the word, we can talk about Eleni if you want.
Thank you. We now have Joe Speck, who is a marketing strategist based here in Barcelona. We met back in London.
20 years ago.
What?
20 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, almost exactly. So this week, in fact, actually. Yeah.
Okay, wow. But before moving to Barcelona, Joe worked on as a private secretary to a British MP, working on the UK Olympics bid and surrounding regeneration projects. And he's also the director of music promotions and club nights organisation called Brand New Beat. And he's going to talk about this question of celebrity and bad taste from a slightly different perspective, using his PR and marketing knowledge to talk about celebrity and bad taste in terms of offence and the kind of PR ramifications that can cause.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Okay, so yeah, it's a matter of taste, allegedly. There we go. Okay. So, thank you to Hannah and Mercedes for the really interesting points that she mentioned. I think we'll have a good discussion about that later. I'm not half as qualified as any of the other people on this panel to talk about celebrity, but I wanted to basically spend a little bit of time educating myself in this as part of the preparation for this talk. And so I've kind of gone back to basics a little bit and tried to get some definitions for my own benefit, but hopefully it will be interesting for us in the discussion that we have. And so my first question is, what is taste? And I think, we've been talking about good and bad taste. And for me, Bad Taste is a film from the 70s. Hopefully everyone's seen it. If you haven't, go and watch it. It's on YouTube. It's so bad, it's good, which is, very often said. Have you not seen it? Oh, it's brilliant. So this basically is Peter Jackson's first film. He wrote it, he directed it, he made most of the graphics and sort of, the like all of the special effects, which are really not very special, but that's the whole point about it. Yeah, so that for me is bad taste, and that's, you know, that is literally, you're saying in the blurb for this, it was about the joy of bad taste. For me, that's what it is, basically. So yeah, really, really good. Low budget shocker, I think it's called. But, you know, just looking at the definitions of taste, it's about the ability to discern what's good quality or a high aesthetic standard. Frightful taste in literature, but also conformity and failure to conform with generally held views concerning what's offensive or acceptable. I think that's important, what's offensive or acceptable. And then bad taste, what is bad taste? So again, poor, indelicate or indiscriminating judgment, especially with regard to what's aesthetically pleasing. Polite, socially appropriate, so, you know, common words coming up in the definitions of appropriacy and also offence in terms of bad taste. So this was actually from another definition, but just highlighting those key points and those key words there of offensive and inappropriate. And, you know, I mean, we've seen already in some of the examples, sex always comes up as a point, but particularly I think in certain things, issues around death or very sort of conscientious or very, very sort of controversial issues. So that helped me. This I found was actually quite interesting. Dennis Miller, I don't know if anyone's heard of him. I hadn't heard of him before, but he's written a book which is called I Rant, Therefore I Am. And this was interesting. Some people will say bad taste is purely subjective because it's a matter of personal likes and dislikes. Well, I disagree. I think it's a matter of my personal tastes and likes and personal likes and dislikes. You see, if you think your two-tone lime green fur-lined 6-inch platform shoes are in good taste, well, then you're wrong. And you know who made me the arbiter of taste? Well, you did, Dr. Naru. I don't know who Dr. Naru is. When you walked in wearing 2 dead fucking Muppets on your feet. Of course, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. So, I just find that funny and interesting, like, you know, and so one of my questions I want us all to think about is what is taste, and, you know, the cop-out or the excuse is that, oh, it's all subjective and there is no such thing as good or bad taste. Like, you know, I don't actually believe that, but it's an interesting thing to think about. So, starting off, we've got an artist on the panel here today, so hopefully he knows this.
So, yes, I won't start. I'll let you talk about
Yes, yeah. This is one of Simon's early works. No, I'm joking. No, so this basically is Manet, and I thought I'd try and sort of go back a little bit into the 19th century and look at this. And so I thought, okay, this is Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, and is actually what at that time was called bad taste. So, you know, is this shocking? Is this disturbing? Is this bad taste? It was considered at the time radical, you know, provoking because of the nude female in the centre. And, you know, we now know this period as like the Belle Epoque during Paris, and it was a time when there was loads of succès de scandale. And, you know, this was a key thing. This is essentially where the phrase, there's no such thing as bad publicity, comes from, basically, which I can guarantee there is such a thing as bad that. But it was this idea that an artistic work whose success is attributed in whole or part to public controversy, and it gets people to think about things. You know, okay, it mentions here titillating content or heightening public curiosity. So I find that quite interesting about raising awareness, getting people to talk about it. So interesting, yeah. Continuing forwards, this was actually a ad in the 19th century. Like, I mean, can you see that? Yeah, it's bigger on the screen there, but insane. So, Pear's transparent soap for improving the complexion. And, you know, this is a real advert used, like, oh, yeah, I mean, don't need to say anything about that, but going back to our definitions, I think that definitely causes offence to a lot of people. This is probably one that you won't know, maybe the Brits on the board will yes. do. But yeah, Tango. So Tango's a soft drink in the UK. It's like kind of Fanta Naranja kind of thing, basically. This was basically these adverts. A lot of people said, oh no, these are terrible, this is terribly bad taste, because it encouraged kids to go around slapping people, basically, right? But it was hugely popular, and actually the director of Britvic, the company that makes the drink, or made the drink, I don't know if it exists anymore, he said that had the brand not been able to take a risk, or prepared to take a risk, and run with the concept, they would have lost a great ad. And it's the sort of thing that a lot of people still remember this ad, even though it was in the late 80s, early 90s. And so being controversial is not a bad thing. It gets noticed and sparks a debate. Another one, let's see if this is going to work. This is a ad for Snickers.
Speed walking, I pity you, fool. You a disgrace to the man race. It's time to run like a real man. Take that, speed walker. Do it again, son.
So just a clip there, but again, like, this section is supposed to be talking about advertising. It's just some random collections of ads, but like advertising and taste. And so where is the line? Where do you draw the line, and where do you say that this is offensive or not? So obviously this had Mr. T, who, you know, very male figure, and firing chocolate bars at a man speed walking in tight yellow shorts. And so, okay, yeah, maybe it was just considered a joke, but then, you know, saying you're a disgrace to the male race, actually Mars, who made Snickers, saying it was supposed to be funny, but humour is highly subjective. So, again, you're getting into this point of where do you draw the line. This is another classic, which I think was in America, actually, I think, originally.
In London.
And London as well. It was on the tube, actually, and so the metro in London. And this was actually banned by the UK Advertising Standards Association, obviously claiming that it promotes an unhealthy body image, an unrealistic image. But this was actually put into Times Square in the States, and it didn't attract that much controversy. People, and we haven't got time to talk about why it didn't, but maybe they've got very different opinions, or maybe they are sort of desensitized to some of these kinds of images. But I think it's clear that advertising is using image, invention, like aspiration to get us to spend money, but how should it do that, and what's the best way, and what's the best tasteful way to do that? This is another one that I'm sure everyone knows. That's just crazy. Like, I mean, it did get banned, and it just got removed, I think, basically. But
it's just an embarrassment.
Yeah, to everyone, like to Pepsi, to Kendall Jenner, to everyone, really.
Like a mourning period for her lost good public image.
Yeah. Like, and it's just wrong in so many ways. It's definitely not appropriate to anyone that's in that ad, because it's the sort of thing that, you know, like, if I watched it loads of times, and sort of, you know, the protesters, they're just saying, join the conversation. What's an advert for Twitter or something? Or like, and then like, there's just, it's so like United Colours of Benetton, it's also perfect. And then she comes out, and the fact that you can solve the conversation problems apparently of the world by having a Pepsi and giving like a cop a Pepsi.
Yeah, to the police.
Yeah, to the police as well. Like, you know, it devalues protest. It also, it just devalues everything. So again, like, what is appropriate and what's offensive, it needs to be thought about more, and I think this is getting a little bit clearer. This was a travel company in Wales, in Cardiff, And they did, I mean, not to be fair, but they did actually not only have images of naked women, it was one image of a naked man as well. But yeah, you know, who thought in the PR agency, like, yeah, this is a great idea? Well, someone that probably believes in the idea of there's no such thing as bad PR. Okay, so point there, like, is research shows like 87% of people think it's unjustifiable to use bad taste to sell a product. And actually 65% thought that it was never acceptable for ads to be in bad taste. However, having said that, a lot of people now think, so I work in marketing, but also specifically in content marketing, and a lot of people now say that, like, content, you've got to get it shareable, you've got to cut above, you've got to cut through the noise. So people saying if your content's not shareable in social, it's toast, it doesn't exist. People don't share bland things. And so I think brands are really trying to not be bland. Like this, for example. So I don't know, again if people know this, but the Paddy Power is a betting company in the UK, and in the States actually as well. And so they do ads like this, you know, orange is the new black.
I didn't see this.
No, like, you know, we're paying out Donald Trump, like, and so, yeah, just very, very interesting, like, about thinking where is that line and where is the sort of the impetus and the urge to shock. And this is the guy, the chief marketing officer from Paddy Power. He basically says that they always apply tests of context and relevance. So is the subject contextual? Could customers be discussing it in the pub tonight? Because, you know, Paddy Power, it's a betting thing. Could one of them be telling it as a joke? Would their friends laugh? And is it relevant? And so, you know, we're talking about them, they have a huge advertising budget that goes into this, basically. And so, yeah, I find it quite interesting. That's another one, a woman's place in the house. But actually, that's quite, I think that is quite funny. Like, and, you know, because it's when she was fighting against Trump and it's in, like, the White House. So, yeah. Right, okay, finally, because I think this, well, a few more, I'll try and rush through. But this is something I think very interesting around taste and class. This is something by Tiffany Jenkins, who has, well, it was an article on the BBC which was about why we should stand up for good taste. And she said, what we call taste is merely a selection of symbolic associations we use to set ourselves apart from those whose social ranking is beneath us. And I watched, as part of this, a documentary that I rewatched from a while ago. I don't know if anyone's seen this, but Grayson Perry is a artist from the UK. Really good fun, great personality as well. And he did a series called All in the Best Possible Taste. And he said this, that there's no such thing as good and bad taste. Taste is simply an expression of your class. What he did in this documentary, it's on YouTube actually, and you can only watch it in Spain, which is quite interesting. So just search for it. It's All in the Best Possible Taste. He was replicating a painting by Hogarth, which was called A Rake's Progress. Like, they're probably too small to see, but basically he did 6 tapestries. So, you know, tapestry, like, very sort of traditionally used to represent kings or queens and that sort of stuff. And he visited for each of, like, well, he visited 3 areas in the UK. So first it was looking at the working class, which are the first 2 at the top. Then did the middle class, and then finally the upper class, like almost aristocracy in the UK. And it was really interesting, this. It was, I mean, I would definitely recommend people going and watching this, because it's about half an hour long, I think, for each episode. And it was really interesting because he talks a lot there about, well, the Chonnies or the Chavs with the working class. He went to Sunderland in the UK, and it was people like involved in football fans going to football matches, and then also girls getting really dressed up and, you know, wearing quite sexually provocative clothes. And then middle class, it was all about there were two parts to the middle class. One was everyone wanted to buy brands because they had finally got some money and they wanted to prove themselves. But then there was the other middle class, which was the kind of people that would read The Guardian in the UK, who actually just wanted to have like their own sense of individuality, and that was much more about cultural capital and not showing that they've got enough money or too much money. And then the upper class finally was an area called the Cotswolds, so it was again like very, very rich, and a lot of people there, it was about old money, people that maybe have had money for a long time, passed down through the generations. So one of my thoughts there was that, is there such a thing as good or bad taste? Is it actually just things that your peers agree or approve of? You're trying to get that, so it's just a difference essentially. So is it that good and bad taste is a sort of a bias in favour of tradition? Quite often I think when we talk of good taste, people are thinking that it's something that has been around for a long time. Why is it something that's old is always better? Okay, and then finally, to relate it a little bit to celebrities, I also looked at some of the celebrities in terms of good taste. And I think, Hannah, did you mention this in your comments? But looking at some of the classic celebrities and what is considered as good taste, I think it's very interesting, just those images there, really. Like, this was just a list from Ranker of the most stylish female celebrities, basically. So, you know, they're described as fashionistas and not worried about taking a risk, but then actually sort of a lot of that is very formal, and why is that a definition of good taste, and who are we to say that that's good taste or not? So what makes these people more stylish than someone like Cardi B or like Bad Gyal or someone like that, yeah? And then obviously to even it up, looking at men, so stylish male celebrities as well. And I mean, this is slightly different because again, it's getting into a little bit more about style rather than just taste. But you know, a lot of the comments here were people trying to look sharp and suave, easy and carefree, or like vintage styles. Yeah, just being able to make things look effortless, that sort of stuff as well. So, celebrities and bad taste. My point here is ultimately, does the idea of what is bad taste, does it change over time? Thinking back to like the Manet painting, is it really subjective? And is there a time and a place for making jokes in bad taste? Some people would say no, looking at Chris Brown here. This was basically at Rihanna's Halloween party, and someone told him it would be a great idea to dress up as a terrorist. 2012, so obviously, like, you know, there's never a good time to do that, but that's a particularly bad time. And then Nicky Hilton, classic as well. 2015, the Casamigos tequila brand Halloween parties. Again, like, you know, in America and the issues with Native Americans, but yes, these celebrities. Actually, it's not these celebrities, it's just the Casamigos party, because this was at the same party as well, where Harry Hamlin was trying to be Sid Vicious and wore a swastika t-shirt, basically, to that same party. So that must have been a complete fail, that party, basically. And then we've got people like Jemina Khan, who dressed as Melania Trump for a Halloween ball. And again, like, you know, this was 2016, so before the Me Too stuff, and obviously, I presume sort of before Trump had actually just become president. But, you know, is this being politically edgy, or is it actually being offensive? I don't know, I'll leave you to think about that one. Maybe, and this is my final point, good and bad taste, particularly in relation to celebrity, it was nailed by Oscar Wilde, that they think the only one thing in life worse than being talked about is not being talked about. Thank you. Yeah.
It's my go now.
Our last speaker is Simon Foxall, who I met when he was at the Royal Academy in
College.
London, Royal College of Art in London, and he's since, as a fine artist, travelled all around the world and has recently settled in Barcelona, so you're very lucky. And Simon's work often interrogates ideas of camp and celebrity and taste and surface play and so forth.
Yeah. Superficiality. So, hello. Yeah, so I don't have a printer, like everybody else. I also don't have an Apple. You may notice. Is this my clicker?
Sorry, of course.
This is exciting. So I took Fab. Thank you. I sort of, I'm not an academic.
And that's why you're here.
And that's why I'm here. I'm an artist, which I also don't really have a proper job. So I thought, where am I accessing this kind of idea of taste? And of course, it's coming from my practice as an artist. I'm also an art history lecturer, and I teach fine art practice at Central St Martin's and at Brighton University. So I'm kind of coming at it from a perspective of art history, but only where it matters to me and my conversations about sort of taste and how that links into what we're talking about. Susan Sontag wrote in 1964, I think, Notes on Camp, where she was talking about campness as this thing that you couldn't grab hold of, because as soon as you did, you'd kill it. You had to kind of just bounce it about on your fingertips. So that's kind of the sort of methodology I'm going for here, talking about taste. It's kind of notes on taste, I suppose. I don't like talking directly about my work, partly for that reason. I sort of do my academic bit. I don't talk about it directly in case I, kill its delicate wings. I actually don't know what it's about half the time. So I like to talk about what's around it, and then we'll pop some pictures in as we go, and we'll just let those two things bump into each other and see if anyone else can make any sense of it. This is not my work, but
it's a valid methodology. We're called textual effects.
Thanks for that.
There you go.
I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. So this is from the Instagram account of the Museo Archeologico Venezia, who bothered me a while ago because I'd done some drawings in there and I tagged the wrong museum. And they were like, so it's actually us. And I apologized, adjusted it, went onto their Instagram account, and I was like, these guys are hilarious. They've got various of these memes where they're just like, let's take a classical sculpture and have him playing Twister. I did a drawing of that one, minus the Twister board. I started, this is a kind of studio glimpse. Let me just make sure okay. I started writing this talk while I was in Turin a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting on my terrace, nude, with a view of the Alps, and I thought, I've got to start writing it here just so that I can say I started writing it here, because it's so ostentatious. I had to draw the Alps in because it was hazy, but they were there. We saw them on the last day after the rains. And I was thinking about how funny this is. Here I am tapping away on my Airbnb, and I thought it's completely ostentatious. And this idea of ostentation is, it's that as soon as you get that sort of peak of like, ooh, it's a bit ostentatious, that's kind of when you start to see a little bit about what taste is about. I could have said I was writing in Torino, which would be fair enough, right? Because it's called Torino. But if I said Torino, that would be pretentious. And that's the other twin gatekeeper of taste, ostentation and pretentiousness. I could say, it's all very well to go, anyone can go for a weekend to Paris, but if you go to Paris, you're a wanker, right? Everyone just thinks you're being completely ridiculous. Pretentiousness is an interesting topic in itself. I've actually got the wrong notes here. I've just realised. I'm reading from the wrong notes, so I may freestyle at some point. So pretentious. I'll just try and keep it short-ish. So there's a great book I was reading quite recently by Dan Fox called Pretentiousness: Why It Matters. And in it, he talks about this idea that pretentiousness is this kind of, it's a crime that only somebody else commits. We could admit to kind of, like charming faults about ourselves, like I do like a gin for breakfast, and everyone goes, oh, you are a one. But nobody says, I'm really pretentious, because then that's the worst thing to be. And yet, really, it's somebody else's crime, always. And it's about breaking a social code. It's about not staying where you should be in one way or another. On the one hand, this can be really, really funny. I don't know what there we go. It can be really funny. So, I don't know, I'm talking old British comedy TV series here. I don't know if it's Keeping Up Appearances. This is Hyacinth Bouquet. It's spelt bucket, but she pronounces it bouquet, because she's got pretensions to be, sort of upper middle class, but she really isn't. And the comedy of all of this is how silly she is for wanting to be better. But the trouble is that she's not bettering herself, it's just sort of snobbery. And on the other side, there's a TV show called Nathan Barley, where Nathan Barley is this kind of Shoreditch East Londoner who really isn't as cool as he thinks he is. So you've got these kind of ideas of pretentiousness being failing and comedic. But at the same time, underneath the humour, the accusation of pretentiousness is about this idea of social control and cultural control. Pretentiousness is, in sort of as a literal translation, is pretending to be something that you're not, which can also be a radical gesture. This is, have you seen Paris is Burning? No? Paris is Burning, 1991, documentary about the New York drag balls, in which basically these were safe spaces for queer people of colour in New York to come together and perform in fantastic outfits. And the various categories were things like executive realness, military realness, couldn't find a picture, ladies' evening wear realness, and these were categories that weren't in themselves particularly outrageous. I mean, an executive is not a wild thing to be, but it is a wild thing to be if you're a young gay black man with, from a lower socioeconomic background in New York in the 80s, you are barred from that field. And so you've got this idea of strangely reinforcing these white American stereotypes and attempting to pass. They're kind of being, the participants are being kind of, they're competing to see if they can pass as various categories that actually uphold these kind of very conservative white American stereotypes. And ironically, in trying to pass, but inevitably failing, it highlights the kind of structure of oppression that places these things there in the first place. I used to live in Hackney, and there was a really horrible bar, one of the new bars in Hackney, for executives. What are they doing in Hackney? And they had a sign outside one day saying, executive realness, happy hour, cocktails, blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's not, you don't get it. That's not executive realness. If executives are going there, that's not executive realness. I would like to be a spoilt white rich girl. It's funny when it's Venus Extravaganza saying it, who is not spoilt, rich or white. That then makes this kind of jump into a kind of conformity, edgy and radical. These are my disco portraits. I want to talk about the 18th century now, because I'm just doing a little hop, skip, and a jump. These are my notes. This idea of sort of celebrity culture as we know it is it's sort of born in the 18th century, really. This idea, and these paintings were part of a large series that I did, broadly called Disco Portraits. I didn't actually admit that out loud. But they were all very brightly coloured paintings of recognizable celebrities playing period roles in a film or TV production that was now also period again. So it was these kind of layers of performance, sort of a realism of performance and distanced by these kind of layers of nostalgia. And they kind of related, a lot of these period pieces related to kind of 18th, early 19th century films, period pieces. This idea of, this idea of the 18th century society kind of inventing celebrity really in a way by turning the lens away from, away from the church and onto, our human societies, kind of invents this idea of us suddenly celebrating the people around us for different reasons. opera singers, actresses. Still a bit risky to be an actress, but we could become interested in our social structures. Madame de Pompadour, for example, in this nice painting from the National Gallery. In a way, she's a little bit of a Kim K of her day, or Paris Hilton. My references are not as up to date as Hannah's, because what you've actually got with someone like Madame de Pompadour is someone who spends her entire life being a perfumed bauble in Versailles, but actually not being. She's incredibly politically aware. She's very powerful. And, without appearing to have done things at all, was extremely active in the running of France at the time. But, like I say, kind of, had to appear to be just this kind of pretty thing in a big dress, struggling in a similar way as Madonna did in 1940s Buenos Aires with Andrew Lloyd Webber. Madame de Pompadour was okay. She didn't suffer the indignities of her later aristocrats, except from dying halfway through this portrait, and the artist carried on painting her anyway, which brought to mind a Jean Genet quote, "To achieve harmony in bad taste is the height of elegance." Marie Antoinette, of course, fared slightly less well. I don't just do paintings, we can movie things. I think Kirsten Dunst is my favourite Marie Antoinette, far more than the original. She fared slightly less well, of course. Corrupted, maybe, but not corrupt. Don't know. Ambiguous. But she met a gruesome, gory end, of course, on the guillotine. Terribly Gothic. Which brought to mind a Baudelaire quote: "What is exhilarating in bad taste is the aristocratic pleasure of giving offence." The idea, of course, of someone like Marie Antoinette really heightens this notion of bad taste. Good and bad taste. Bad taste can go really, really badly wrong if you're not careful. I mean, sort of, what happened to Marie Antoinette could arguably be this kind of this flip of what happens when tastes change, when fashion changes. There she is. And I quite like this painting because she looks a bit like a sort of ethereal ghost-like creature, even though she's not quite dead yet. And this period of time, from with the French Revolution into the Industrial Revolution, as well, these kind of twin kind of revolution threats, one of which, of course, was terrifying for all the sort of bloodshed on the streets, and the other one terrifying for all this new kind of machinery and technology, brought about my favourite art history period, the Neo-Gothic. This isn't Neo-Gothic, this is actual Gothic, and Gothic is pre-Renaissance art and architecture. It's kind of, it's artwork it's artwork and architecture that's just about revering the church. It's about social control. It's not about individuality. It's not about society, and it's not about looking at the world around us. It's just about looking to God. And it's sort of this kind of medieval or Dark Ages, as we sometimes call it, artwork. This kind of pre-enlightened artwork. The Gothic had nothing to do with the Goths. The Gothic was so called by thinkers in the Renaissance who looked back at this art and architecture of preceding centuries and said, God, that's awful. Let's call it Gothic, because the Goths were this kind of barbarian, wild tribe. And so it was termed as an offence. It's basically possibly the only movement in art history which is defined entirely by its bad taste. All other movements go in and out of fashion, but Gothic was never in from the moment it got its name. Neo-Gothic, this is Neo-Gothic artwork of mine. Neo-Gothic is this revival of the Gothic spirit, the ghosts and monsters and mysteries and fear and terrors, and it goes into art and into literature. This is my kind of Katie Price as Medusa in the Jungle Book. I didn't do anything with this in the end, but it's still there, if everyone need to project it onto a building. And so this kind of, what Neo-Gothic did was it took this kind of, all this kind of energy of ridiculous, over-the-top fear and spiritual otherness, and used it as a strategy. It was probably the first point at which bad taste is aimed for. As I say, Marie Antoinette failed in her good taste and ended up bad taste, but neo-Gothics set out to be bad taste. They wanted to take all this stuff that was going to shake things up. Because taste, of course, we see as quite fickle, but also binary. It's good or it's bad. It usually goes from one to the other. But bad is an accident and can be treacherous. Neo-Gothic was bad taste deliberately. This is from YouTube, but my little picture for the Castle of Otranto, which was a Gothic novel written in the 1760s by Horace Walpole. He actually pretended he'd found it and translated it. It was supposed to be from Naples in about 1529, and he just found it and translated it, so he wasn't responsible for all of its sort of terrible content. So he also, in that sense, neo-Gothic invents the idea of the guilty pleasure, because of course we wrote exactly what he wanted to write and then pretended he didn't. A lot of neo-Gothic literature is set in another time and another place. So this kind of idea of taste being local and therefore bad taste being othering is sort of there as well in neo-Gothic literature. Frankenstein, fast forward 1818, you've got written by Mary Shelley. I don't really need to talk about Frankenstein, we all know what that's about, but Dr. Frankenstein makes a monster, doesn't take responsibility for it, carnage. It is, of course, a metaphor for a kind of patriarchal, male-dominated society moving forward blindly with progress and refusing to take any responsibility for where it may lead. Mary Shelley was the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, who was a prominent feminist before we really had feminists. I think she was kind of on her own at the time, almost, wasn't she? Vindication of the Rights of Women, 1796. Can't remember. And Horace Walpole was gay. So this kind of horror sci-fi space that was created in the neo-Gothic was kind of bookended by queerness and feminism, which I think is quite an interesting, sort of ties into these ideas of looking alternatively at the structures of society that are being presented to you. This is a piece that I made called Diana Ross of the Apocalypse, which was a collaboration with a friend of mine who made these little sculptures. And this is Divine. We should talk a bit about Divine. If Paris is Burning attempts to play by the rules of white Western taste, but inevitably fails on the basis of race, gender, and sexuality, Divine takes the opposite approach and very deliberately pursues a path of outrageous bad taste. As Hannah said earlier, Divine worked with John Waters in such classic films as Pink Flamingos, where she famously eats dog poo that's immediately been pooed out of a dog. She plays the small-town teenage girl turned fame-hungry lunatic in Female Trouble, to a suburban housewife who's just trying to get it right. I love this picture of her reading Cahiers du Cinema. And so in some ways, Divine was this perfect embodiment of very deliberate bad taste, with a name, of course, that comes from this kind of divine divinity. It's this kind of idea of a sort of religious, spiritual hierarchy then adopted in the 20th century as a kind of effeminacy. It's divine, darling. Real men don't say that, do they? They didn't say divine till it actually meant God, since it actually meant God. So this idea of binary good and bad taste, I have a slight problem with my own practice, because the thing is with bad taste, in all of its deliberate sort of attempts to strip everything down, is it kind of, for me, it always feels like it's somehow in good taste's shadow. What is bad taste is defined by what is good taste. And we sometimes say no taste, like someone has no taste, and it's kind of, what does that mean? It's euphemistically supposed to mean the same as bad taste, but it also suggests a kind of, a middle space in which perhaps something can be explored. Excuse me, a bit croaky. Dave Hickey, one of my favourite writers, wrote an essay called A Rhinestone as Big as the Ritz, and it was an essay about authenticity and taste, which he used the now no longer open Liberace Museum in Las Vegas as a kind of prism through which to discuss these things. Liberace, obviously famous television pianist, was always covered in rhinestones and had his candelabra.
And sincerely believed to be straight by his female fans who adored him.
Yeah, in fact, he took a British newspaper to court for implying that he wasn't straight and won. I mean, just goes to show. It's hiding in plain sight, perhaps. It's almost like, if it's illegal, which it was at the time, and I'm in this many diamonds, do you really think? Like, are you kidding me? So one of the sort of showpieces of the Liberace Museum is this Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, which when Liberace bought it was one of only 7 remaining in the world, and he covered it in rhinestones. And the entire museum is full of stuff that is covered in rhinestones, so much so that Swarovski gave him the biggest rhinestone they'd ever made. And of course, this offends popular taste in so many ways. One of 7 remaining historic cars now covered in rhinestones for all eternity. What Dave Hickey says is in this museum there was a genuine Louis XVI writing desk that he had bought at an antique auction house in Paris and had shipped over to Vegas. And Dave Hickey said that is the one inauthentic piece in that entire museum because it's an imported set of values. Whereas everything else, even the outrageousness of destroying a rare vintage car, I mean, you know, it's fabulous. But even that it's authentic. It's Liberace just doing what he wants to do. And Dave Hickey came up with this absolute classic of a quote, which I love, which is, bad taste is real taste, good taste is the residue of other people's privilege. Which I think is tidy, isn't it? And so, this is my blank slide, because I actually forgot to put some of my... There are going to be some of my paintings here, but you can imagine them. They're really, really good. And so I've been painting recently, kind of sort of inspired by, final quote, Warhol and his belief that, as he said, he's a profoundly superficial person. This idea of profundity and superficiality, creating a weird, tense space in which what happens, I don't know. Maybe something can happen that isn't good or bad taste. Maybe it's just sort of a no-taste weirdness. What I've been doing at the moment is painting my boyfriend over and over and over again, wearing my shirts because they're better than his, and wearing my sunglasses because he doesn't have any. Just looking at me blankly, like passport photos, because he doesn't have a top lip at all. It's just like the thinnest mouth. And I'm just like this bland mouth that I love, that I keep just painting over and over again. And this idea of it being really, it's just totally about my life. It's like, this is my boyfriend over and over again. It means nothing. It's not even authentic portraiture because he's wearing my clothes. And so this kind of idea of, at the moment, I'm trying to sort of think about where this might be, this strange kind of space. And I don't know where it is, but I'm interested in finding out. So that's where I am at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, we're all pointing towards this mic now, so huddle up, come snuggle. Thank you all for different perspectives, but again, as I suggested at the beginning, a huge amount of overlap. We didn't know that we would both be talking about taste, celebrity, class and gender, punishment. We didn't know that we would both be talking about drag queens, and yet these, whatever our different spheres that we're working in, these things have come up. So I'm going to start there because I think it's really interesting that you've come up with Grace and Perry to talk about. So Grace and Perry, that's the British potter who dresses as a woman, and you've talked about the drag balls of New York and executive realness, and we've both talked about divine. So what is it about camp that creates a space, or kitsch as well, to look at it in a kind of separate, as another way? How is that, clearly that's creating a space, and you're talking about the importance of who's speaking in terms of framing it becoming an analysis of the rules. If taste, if we're all accepting, is a set of unspoken social rules, why is it particularly that this performative figure of the drag queen creates a space for talking about and understanding the rules? Because we've all got there one way or another. And even when we haven't explicitly, when we're talking about a performed femininity through the deliberately fake aesthetic, as you were talking about with the importance of fake nails or hair extensions and all of that. If authenticity is always at stake in celebrity culture and the idea of naturalness is at stake in good taste, how come all four of us have got to this place of, drag, even if it's women performing fake femininity, one way or another?
So it's a bit like a kind of, like the sort of funhouse mirror, isn't it? The kind of like, those kind of wonky mirrors that make your body look weird. And it's like, I suppose there's something about the performativity and the artifice of it that is the sort of jolt you need, the little sidestep out, because no matter how aware you think you are, we are all in our positions as sort of readable beings within this society. And you need those little moments of reminding, and maybe there's something performed in that function of the idea of just that sort of that rupture.
That moment of gender trouble, to use Judith Butler.
Exactly. And I think it was interesting saying about kitchen camp, because I don't know if it's relevant, but I always remember trying to grapple with this and talking to friends of mine. I'd be like, what is the difference between kitchen camp? And we'd just be like, nobody knows. It's a bit like when nobody thought they knew what postmodernism was. But I kind of got to a point where I felt that the definition with kitchen camp was kitsch was an accident and camp was deliberate. So, my grandmother used to have the most terrible ornaments on her mantelpiece, but she thought they were beautiful. If I'd had them on my mantelpiece, they'd have been like, an ironic kind of hipstery aside.
But it's interesting because she doesn't think they're kitsch. They become kitsch through the eyes of someone else who knows a set of social codes that she apparently doesn't. So again, it really matters whose eyes, who's
something
speaking.
can only really be kitsch if the person on whom that sort of decision has been made is completely authentically believing in that other structure.
But it also suggests another person to endorse the idea, who's speaking, to endorse the idea that they are right about those being the social codes, as opposed to your nana's friend who shares her aesthetic, who wholeheartedly, authentically believes in it.
And the thing, and I wonder if those little kind of moments, I've sort of got this, that sort of idea of that little step out, because you have to step out of the code somehow. But then, of course, I suppose now I'm worried that you can't do it without being judgmental. And now I'm sad.
I want to move on from that point, but I don't want to move on too fast if either of you wanted to speak specifically to kitchen camp.
No, go on, after you.
Okay. So, can I? Yeah, I mean, talking about drag and camp, I want to talk about RuPaul's Drag Race, which I know it's just faking drag and inserting this reality television show and all that. But it's interesting how in RuPaul's Drag Race, for example, there's this negotiation about what is authentic and what is not, and their true selves. Maybe it's their this drag persona, and how taste is embedded in all that. Because in RuPaul's Drag Race, of course, the contestants they are like reinterpreting the rules of taste, and they are subverting definitions of femininity and what is appropriate. But there's also this clear cultural hierarchy within how they are being judged. And sometimes, I don't know if you have watched a lot of episodes of RuPaul's Drag Race, but you can see how a lot of times the panel of judges, they sometimes it appears this idea of she has not reached this taste level yet. I mean, there are taste levels, so there are rules that are being enforced because, of course, it's not just a free space, but they are enforcing this kind of rules that have a lot to do with class, and also it has a lot to do with economic capital. And even when some contestants, they are arguing that I'm poor, I don't have enough materials, and no, girl, you I mean, this is just an excuse, but it's not actually, because there's, I mean, taste and cultural capital and economic capital are all embedded, and they are quite visible in the program. So I think it's like the other, it's the other side of Paris burning and all the drugs.
So let's talk about that cultural, economic and educational capital. Because I was really interested in the examples, in the kind of competing but similar examples of Cardi B and, is it Rosalia?
Yes.
Rosalia. So education is functioning slightly differently in both of those, right? So it's having an education it can be a source of inauthenticity if it means that you are not. Are you actually appropriating these signs and codes of a of the musical subgenre, for example, if you're not actually from there? But in the instance of Cardi B, it's legitimizing because it's demonstrating substance, a reason to take her seriously. And there are a number of examples of that, aren't there? That made me think of Megan Thee Stallion, who is similar to Cardi B in her is a black R&B singer with a deliberately sexualized, like reveling in the sexualized. So I think twerking has come up a bit, hasn't it? And I think twerking as an act of deliberate self-sexualization. We've used this word reveling a lot. And Megan Thee Stallion talks about herself saying that's some hot girl shit, because she's always saying she's delighted with her, the appearance that she is projecting. She also has been on the hashtag Hot Girl Semester because she's at grad school at the same time as having this pop career. Rihanna set up scholarships to send black kids from underprivileged communities to go to university. And Kim Kardashian at the moment is also doing a degree and posts about this. So there's clearly a moment right now where educational capital has moved from being this treacherous thing that might expose you, if you are the kind of celebrity presumed not to have it, and it's being traded now as a way of saying, I am, as you were showing with Kim Kardashian on the Forbes magazine, I am not just that. It's a very different way of being to the kind of Katie Price. I started with, hello, I admit I'm fake, and I love your transposition of her onto the Gothic. If you told, so Katie Price is probably not cross-cultural enough, not a kind of transmedia figure enough for you to be familiar with her, but she's the kind of star that if you told me she had a postgraduate degree in postmodern theory, I would believe you, because the performance of performance is that flawless.
Yes.
But it is quite interesting that though, isn't it? Because I could believe that as well. Like, that it was all part of an act, and she's Katie Price, but also Jordan as well. That was her model name as well. So she's already taken on these different identities. And I think we've all said it, but that part of performance and playing a role is really important for me, I think, because what is fake and what is real, and I mean, this goes back to the whole point, doesn't it, of celebrity. Particularly, we've spoken about like Gran Hermano and Big Brother, and then Celebrity Big Brother, which is really interesting for me as well. And so you're taking on that role and giving that performance, whether it's in a drag or, you know, Grace and Perry taking on a role and living within other people, that gives you then a kind of freedom to investigate and you know, think about other types of taste. I think that's quite interesting.
So there's a defensiveness here, right? Whether it's you know, you gave the examples of Mary Shelley and Walpole, as well as the examples of you know, being a genuinely in danger poor black gay man in is it Harlem, the drag balls.
They're all over, I think.
Okay, well, in America's drag ball culture, versus being the kind of female celebrity that has to navigate this impossible space where you're never, and you showed those pictures of what's a good stylish celebrity, never classy enough, or in Rosalia's case, you know, educated enough versus authentic enough, never enough. So this performing, you talk about playing a role, kind of a defensive act. Sontag, you started with Sontag. She talks about against interpretation being pure surface as a way of evading those who want to know and excavate behind you, and as a result destroy.
You know, she calls it an act of Philistinism, which is the idea that, you know, if you excavate something, you know, what you're trying to do is you're trying to break it down into pieces that then become a code that you can decode and read, and then you've got the answer, like a maths equation. And she sort of talks about that notion as being a kind of highly Philistinistic way of approaching. She's talking about art, of course, but it can be.
But it could be a
expanded
person.
Out
it could,
massively, of course.
It could be living in the world as a woman, or as a gay man, or as any kind of person under threat in the impossible space of the public eye, or life.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's as a side point, you know, just that, you know, I showed that slide of Venus Extravaganza, who was dead before the film was released.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, she was murdered, you know, about a year or two before the film was released. And so you've got this kind of, for Venus Extravaganza, that film is sort of the only place that she lives.
Okay, so my last question before I open it up to the floor is, in that case, what's at stake in these questions of good and bad taste? And it sounds like, to some degree, our safety.
I think it's interesting looking at those kind of older examples of adverts and how we look at them now and go, oh my God, you know. And of course, some are really extreme. But actually, only yesterday, my partner, who's from Barcelona, was showing me a 1970s advert for little chocolate sweets, and the advert is of like sort of cartoon African babies running along, and white fingers coming in and picking them out.
Gosh.
And eating them.
Justin Trudeau in the news today in blackface, when he was a teacher, not when he was a student. That's today's news.
I was too busy running between campuses to deal with any of today's news. But I think that's the thing.
So we've talked about distancing, haven't we? But actually it's closer than we think.
And I think this is the thing. I think when you look at all of this stuff and you and those examples, and you bring it all down to, you know, you could talk about bad taste and all these constructions as much as you like, but actually it does boil down to the basic sort of our safety as animals. It's almost like it's outside of all of that. Yeah. It's about the safety of individuals in the harshest sense.
But isn't that going further than bad taste? Isn't that just offensive or racist or sexist? I
suppose.
Yes.
And so because I was trying to think, like, is there something that is kind of okay in taste, and so there is something, like we were talking about tasteful or having no taste or something like that. Is there an area where you can play around with those things safely without causing offence? And so is there an area where, like Rosalia, perfect example. I went to Primavera Sound this year, didn't go and see Rosalia because I was watching an English football game instead at the same time, and like said, oh no, I don't want to go and see Rosalia because I don't like her, she's not to my taste or whatever. But I have to say, it was amazing because there were so many people that don't normally go to Primavera Sound that went on the Saturday night to see Rosalia. And like that's cool, like that's loads more people getting into experience something that they didn't have before.
Destabilising cultural hierarchies.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Because I think at taste it has to do with inequality.
Yeah.
Most of all, because you were talking about how it seems that all tastes are subjective, but I think that there are tastes that are more subjective than others, right? So it's this homology between the social and cultural hierarchies. So I think it has to do with inequality and how we perceive different social groups, because you were talking about pretentiousness and also about authenticity. These are maybe authenticity is like the only element that working class taste can defend. It's the only attribute that it seems positive, or that we middle classes.
Not only in the eyes of.
Yes, of course. Absolutely.
You fetishise the scally just because of what?
Exactly.
Because he drops his H's. It's kind of it's always got, it's a bit like the kitchen camp thing, isn't it? You can't get away from it.
And it has to do with this idea of being the working class being primitive, and the idea of the cultivated nature of the middle classes and the natural nature of the working classes. It's a lot of that. And actually, talking about Grayson Perry, what I think is very interesting about the program is that what is really interesting is that when he's doing the working class episode, he's doing it himself. He goes there and he talks with people, and he can. They seem, all these people he's talking with, they seem pretty easy to read. They are easy to be analyzed, so they put a lot of effort in how they look, these kind of elements. But then in the middle class episode, which is really interesting because it makes visible what is invisible, what is normalized. But what is also interesting is that he needs a sociologist to unpack the middle class identity, because it's so difficult to read. Right?
Yeah, and he's also middle class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
but that's also really interesting, because that goes back to kind of the definitions, or how taste changes through the class structure, I think, as well. So it is, for whatever reason, it's more brash and open in the working classes, and then you go to upper class and everyone tries to not have any taste, or they try to hide it, at least in the upper middle class as well. And that's interesting. It's like almost having your own individuality, where you go and buy vintage things, like the farmer's market is so middle class, and that's in like Grayson Perry episode. But that is just a specific part as well, and
Which I think goes back to the question of effortlessness that came up in the examples of celebrity style that gets praised. Bourdieu is a French sociologist, talks about effort as being evidence of not being able to do what should come naturally if you were playing by the rules correctly. Again, I think that's going back to my very first slides, and a scholar called Bev Skeggs. Part of the problem, part of the reason for the criticism and the censure of a figure like Katie Price and that fake aesthetic is that it should be effortless to, women should be decorative, but they should attract attention effortlessly, and to willfully attract admiration is basically going back to what you insinuated when you talked about the problems of being famous for being an actress in the 18th century. To willfully attract the gaze is to be a whore. Right? And that is something that has the threat of being perceived to be a prostitute, to be prostituting yourself, is something that has accompanied kind of female visibility for at least that long, probably much longer.
I mean, I think one of the things I always talk with my students about is the figure of Venus in European painting. You know, you have 500 years of Venus. You know, this mythical figure who, fortunately for the male painters, the male clients, the male viewers, never has any clothes on, but that's because mythology designed her that way, so it's not them being smutty. And of course, what you've actually got is 500 years of paintings of the kind of women who had nothing to lose in order to be the model for Venus. Mm-hmm. So you have the absolute highest figure of femininity in Venus being modelled endlessly by prostitutes, essentially, by the majority of the models of Venus were prostitutes. So the very, very lowest, the most maligned women in the society being the only ones who have nothing to lose in the intermediate stage to become Venus. It's a really strange thing.
Yeah. We've wanged on for so long and have to open it up to you guys. I say have to. I'm very excited, love to, want to know what you think, so have to sadly stop us there.
I was going to sing a song, but okay, it's fine.
Thank you all for listening so beautifully. Have you are there any questions in the audience?
Yeah, we have a microphone here.
Well, actually, I don't have a question. It's like a couple of thoughts about that are related with the connections between taste and class. The first one is about one particular thing that has been mentioned a couple of times, and that really fascinates me. That it's the fake nails, because I read this. I think that it was with Bad Gyal, an interview where she said that for her, the fake nails were a statement, a kind of a statement, because having these fake nails means that she doesn't have to work with her hands. I mean, which is really incredible, because working with the hands is one thing that everybody relates with working class people. So that's my first thought, and I would like to know your opinions about this. And the second one is about how taste can be more exclusive than class. I was thinking, you mentioned a couple of times, and I was thinking about two particular, one film and one TV show. The first is Small Time Crooks, the Woody Allen's film, where this couple became rich by robbing a bank. And how they try to fit in the American upper class, and it's impossible, especially for the women. And she hires this really posh character portrayed by Hugh Grant, which is kind of funny also. And yeah, at the end, it's like money doesn't buy class or taste. You know, you have to born with it. And even if you became rich by robbing a bank or by winning the lottery, you are not one of our own. And that, I really find it really interesting. And another example I'm thinking about, it's quite different about what we're talking here but it's The Wire, and how, especially the characters of D'Angelo Barksdale and Stringer Bell, how they trying to become rich by stop doing illegal things and working on the streets selling drugs and investing in properties. And how at the end they feel rejected, that they don't belong to this sphere, you know?
That takes us back to performativity and drag and passing, doesn't it? Because class, like gender, is a social code that you can pass or fail. And celebrity is a process by which many people become famous, but they don't become rich, but they don't become upper class, do they?
I was remember having this conversation with my mum, who's a terrible snob, and she was saying something really offensive about Katy Perry, and just being like, oh, you know, blah, blah. And I was just like, Mum, she's got so much more money than you. Like, why, like, you're talking down at her, and I used to like teasing her and be like, she's so much more wealthy than your mum. But my mum, she had to hold on to this kind of middle-class superiority because Katy Perry, or Jordan as was, actually had a really long career. I was thinking about this when you said about Katy Perry and Jordan. Sorry, Katie Price. Have I just been talking about Katy Perry?
Momentarily, yeah.
She's literally on my brain all the time.
Fair.
She came up in my Facebook memories. We didn't hang out, I just posted a picture of her. That she actually had a long enough career to swap names. Yeah. Katy Price to Katy Perry. No, Katy Price to Jordan. So I think, this idea of, like you're saying, that it's so many subtle signifiers, and it's almost like the pride of the signifiers being obscure enough that you're going to make a mistake. It's not like you can learn it, and this kind of pride in not being able to learn it, no matter how much money you've got, however you get it, that there'll always be a load of people who've got far less money than you sneering down their nose at you because you've got a couple of the really obscure codes wrong.
Yeah.
It's pretty poisonous.
Go ahead.
According and Bourdieu talks about cultural capital and taste. The main role of taste is precisely to make it difficult to escape your own class and go to another one, because you don't know that these rules, these habitus, these things that they are difficult to identify. So it's not about money. Money, it's easy to, well, it's not easy of course, but money, it may be more easy to earn more money than learning all the social, all the cultural capital that goes with the position. And it's interesting the idea about the fake nails. I didn't read that interview, but it's interesting because she is using this. The idea that you don't have to work manually, it has a lot to do with a lot of clothes like suits and skirts and shirts and all that. So applying that to the fake nails, I think it's interesting because it applies something that it's actually very middle class to the idea, or it's a sign of upward social mobility.
Yeah. Like the function that the suntan used to perform. That, you didn't have a suntan. If you were upper class Northern European, you wouldn't have a suntan because workers in the field had suntan. And that was, I think, popularised by Chanel, I think, in the 20s. But it was...
and actually, high heels were originally worn by Venetian men to show that they had staff and that they were decorative and ornamental, the role that was then taken on by women. There's a question there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for your presentations. I'm not sure if we can talk about authenticity while talking about celebrities, actually. The thing is that most of the time, culture industry takes these little elements of authenticity in order to promote consumerism, which is a keyword when we are talking about celebrities. So even though you're talking about good taste or bad taste, I think that's the same faces in the same coin. Like, it's about money to me. Yeah. So I was wondering if any of your work have considered the public opinion, the spectators or the audiences, in order to see how they interpret bad taste and good taste, but with this connection, in relation to the system, to the market, which is promoted.
Yeah.
In any way, consumerism at the end.
So Richard Dyer in the 70s talked about authenticity in this way, and Lionel Trilling, even before that, in the 60s. Lionel Trilling wasn't talking about celebrity culture, but it's really useful. He talks about how it can only ever be externally. Authenticity is a fiction. I talked about it in passing because we didn't really have time to unpack it. But it's nonetheless, we have to talk about it because it's a crucial narrative. It may not be a real, plausible, possible thing to quantify, but it's always there in the discourse. So for trilling, he talks about how it can only ever be externally imposed. It's a value judgment that, like beauty, lies in the eye of the beholder. And yet, it's an undeniable currency in celebrity culture and a commodified celebrity culture. So I talk about it in my forthcoming book as an economics of access. Right, so the idea, and it's a gendered authenticity contract, where the idea that exposing more of yourself, being more available, more visible, whether that's your kind of internal rambling thoughts on long Instagram posts, or whether that's your stripped bare body, which, Caroline Calloway is a kind of architect of zeitgeist celebrity culture, because she does the combination of the two there, with the rambling inner, kind of stream of consciousness almost, to communicate authenticity in her sharing of her thoughts, whilst also her exposed body, crucially at a time, because another source of authenticity, it should always be in scare quotes, right? But another source of authenticity is emotional excess or a lack of control. And she's supposedly a spiraling addict as well, who's trying to recover. So she's got this kind of nexus of signs, signifiers. It's not that she has authenticity, but she has a nexus. She's drawing upon various currencies that communicate authenticity all at once, with her emotional breakdown and grief in the shadow of her father's death, her exposed body, her presentation of her innermost thoughts, and the perception of being out of control. It's like in Jersey Shore, the character Snooki was often filmed drunk and was loved because then this idea, she must be being herself. If she's drunk, she can't be putting on a conscious performance and therefore hoodwinking us with the idea of her being presenting herself in a strategic way. And so often this centres around gender, and I think in the Snooki example, she would often have sex with people drunk. And so this, the kind of sexualisation of ideas of authenticity in being both out of control and exposed. It's a kind of interesting complements there. Do you want to say anything as well to that?
No, I mean, authenticity is a social construct. I mean, authenticity it's nothing empirical. It's what we think collectively that it is, I think. So, I mean, what is interesting is to see how nowadays authenticity is constructed in a certain way. It was defined in a certain way that has to do with what Hannah was saying about this also constructed intimate sphere that you show, this idea of not being able to hide your emotions, and all this has to do with reality television and with social media. All this have helped to define authenticity in these specific ways, right?
So it's like, as a currency, it's vexed, and yet it's no less valuable. It's like it's the ultimate kind of emperor's new clothes. It's the ultimate Bitcoin.
It's just a little subcategory of good taste.
Right. Basically. Yeah, exactly. That, and there is the relationship.
And I think the thing is as well with I sort of approach it with my painting. I paint figures, and so I'm always thinking about what does whether it's somebody I know, whether it's working from found images. I was sort of thinking about what is it, what are we putting together in this space, this idea of a person. And of course, that's the thing that celebrities operate as, in the same way as, talked about Venus just before, the same way as Venus has operated for 500 years as an idea of something, to most sort of users of the system that is out there of celebrity culture, because most of us are not celebrities. I don't know, one of you might be, because I don't know, I'm not. But, so for those of us who aren't working on it, for those of us who aren't celebrities but are looking, at celebrity culture all the time, the authenticity of that individual, like you're saying, it is imposed from outside. It's a subcategory of good taste. It's like pretentiousness and ostentatiousness, which of course are subcategories of bad taste. It's this kind of thing. It's like, what do we need from them? It's like when I'm painting, what do I need from Colin Firth in Pride and Prejudice when I'm making that painting. I just need a few things that may or may not be authentic, that I'm having a conversation with for myself. And that's kind of what we're using, that's what we use celebrities for. We like to see Snooki drunk because it might make us feel a little bit better about last weekend.
That's the collective pleasure
might
of
give us an
celebrity.
idea for next weekend. Who knows?
Okay, last question.
Okay, thank you very much for your inspiring full talks. I have in my mind a lot of different ideas, and you have arised a lot of questions in my mind that probably it's impossible to have a close and only close answer. Any case, I have no answers, but in some way, from a feminist perspective, I think that in some way, celebrities open the door to a new forms of feminine models, non-white, non-rich, and non-upper class, in a provocative new models to be a woman in the space, in the open public space. So I agree, or I think this is a powerful situation for different women. It's not need to be a white, rich, the white pressure model, okay? Crossing in the intersection with social class in this way. But I have problems. I think that there is a different feminine models, okay? Provocative models. I think that it's very interesting how the use of the fake nails with a strong, masculine, aggressive positions is a woman in aggressive position, in a classic masculine position of power, with fake nails. That in this way they remember, but I am a woman with nails, okay? So it's a paradox, it's a very interesting paradox, aesthetic, very interesting paradox. But I have problems if this discourse is a feminist discourse. I don't know. I have the question, and I really thank you because your discourse, your speeches, your talks allows me to think about the difference between different models of feminist bodies, but it's not necessarily a feminist discourse.
Yeah. So Efrat Zilan, who is a fantastic feminist philosopher who is not widely cited these days, but I find really useful on this specifically. Again, she wasn't writing about celebrity, but she talks about femininity going back from like myths of Lilith versus Eve and so forth. Talks about femininity as an impossible space. And if femininity is an impossible space, then the responses to that, then the ways of existing within that will always be riddled with contradiction, because you can never be enough of both this and both that. You are always battling competing demands upon you. So, yeah, exactly. So in some ways, I think what you're seeing, what's coming up there is the irreconcilability of good femininity under the gaze of an audience, of a society that will always cast judgment that is rooted in all of these contradictory, often deeply historic narratives of what woman is, should be, can be. And through that lens, I think we can say, yes, absolutely, inevitably, and always, maybe, it's going to be contradictory, and that's going to reveal that space, that impossible space, is something of a battlefield.
But just on that, I think it's interesting because it is contradictory, but then is that necessarily bad? Because actually I think they're just trying to do something, and okay, I always struggle with this myself, with like, you know, shouldn't we just everyone be equal? Which, you know, like you can't be, of course not. We've got the whole of human history, male human history, to deal with that. But what people are trying to do, they're trying to sort of, take on or appropriate these male stances. So it was Ross Elliot, wasn't it, with like the legs wide open, sat like that, whilst then still having the fake nails. So yeah, I agree, that's maybe not authentic, it's like contradictory. And so they're just trying to make a statement, basically, to appropriate those values, whereas really what we should all be trying to do as society is change society and listening to the people and listening to what people say and what they feel and think. And so...
And asking why certain visual stances signify...
Yes, exactly. Power or...
or its lack.
Exactly. And, obviously it's easy, and we have commentators and the press and celebrities are there, and we study them and talk about them. But actually, I'd be more interested in how we can actually get society to change its views and its thoughts about these kind of things. But that's pretty difficult and complicated.
Yeah, I think one of the things I kind of always think about this with queer theory, and where queer theory does and doesn't overlap with sort of feminist theory is, something that is very subjective, I think. But there are obviously certain common foe, for a start. But there's a lot of. But what's interesting, I think, sometimes about queer theory is this idea of it not having a position, actually, of its kind of sort of slipperiness, that it somehow positions itself as a sort of big question mark on whatever we're thinking now. It's like, oh, but what if? And so it's almost like, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine talking about this, and they were sort of saying, well, surely the idea behind queer theory is we kind of reach a destination. And I was like, it's probably going to be awful. We're going to have to ask questions again. So it's sort of this idea that actually, that if something like queer theory can exist, and this is the thing that a lot of stuff with sort of queer culture has been, there's been, on the one hand, all of this kind of equality assimilation drive, which obviously is really important. But then the flip side is this kind of renegade potential of queer theory to maintain an open sort of space of friction, not for the sake of causing trouble for trouble's sake, but because that's interesting, and because it always just makes you go, oh, something doesn't quite fit again. Great, because that's actually really interesting, because society just isn't cohesive in that way, is it? It's kind of...
And I think that's something that we've seen, and I'm going to end on this thought because we're massively over time, that what we've seen here across all of the presentations is that good and bad taste is a set of unspoken rules that is trying to police boundaries that always will fail. And we've highlighted the examples that we have because they're interesting, because they show the weakness of that boundary. They show that it is friable, that it is permeable, that it can be crossed, and that causes the tension. Maybe good and bad taste are only highlighting the impossibility of all of these categories anyway. Thank you so much for coming and listening. Thank you to our panel.